Stick with me while I share my story, and if it touches you, don't forget to support our channel by hitting that subscribe button, dropping a like, and sharing it with the people you care about. I'd survived 8 years in a wheelchair, learned to drive with hand controls, learned to live without the use of my legs. But nothing prepared me for the night my own brother put his hands on the back of that chair and shoved me to the floor in front of 200 people. My name is Claire Bennett. I'm 26 years old. 8 years ago, an accident changed my life completely, and I've used a wheelchair ever since. My family never talked about that night the way it really happened. They had their own version of the story, and for a long time, I let them keep it. My older brother is Tyler Bennett. He's 2 years older than me, and growing up, he was always the one everyone noticed first. He was good at sports, good with people, good at making our parents proud. I loved him. I still do in some complicated way. But love doesn't always mean someone treats you right. When this story starts, Tyler was about to get married. His fiancée was Emily Carter, the daughter of one of the most well-known and respected families in our town. Her parents, Robert and Susan Carter, owned a string of successful businesses and were known across the community for being honest, decent people. For my parents, Richard and Diane Bennett, this engagement was a huge deal. It wasn't just about Tyler being happy. It was about how our family would look standing next to a family like the Carters. I noticed small things changing in the weeks before the engagement party. Conversations that stopped when I rolled into the room. Plans being made without me. My mother choosing her words a little too carefully whenever my chair came up. I told myself I was imagining it. I wanted to believe my own brother's wedding would be a happy time for all of us, including me. I had no idea that night would turn into the moment everything I'd carried quietly for 8 years would finally break open. I had no idea that the brother I protected, the one I never blamed even when I had every right to, was about to do something in front of everyone that he couldn't take back. And I had no idea that the secret sitting between us since I was 18 years old was finally going to come out, not because I chose to share it, but because he gave me no other choice. That summer, before everything changed, we were just 2 siblings at a lake house party with a group of friends. I was 18, about to start my senior year. Tyler was 20, home from college for the break, already being talked about as the star of his football team. Our father, Richard, had coached at our high school for years, and people in town respected him. Tyler being good at football meant a lot to him. It was late when we left the party. Tyler had been drinking most of the night, but when it was time to go, he grabbed the keys before I could say anything. I remember telling him I could drive instead. He laughed it off and said he was fine. I was 18, and he was my older brother. I didn't know how to push back harder than that. So I got in the passenger seat. I don't remember much about the crash itself. One moment we were on the road, and the next, everything was lights and noise and pain. When I woke up, I was in a hospital bed, and a doctor was standing over me explaining, in a calm voice, that I would never walk again. I was 18 years old, hearing those words for the first time, still half in shock from everything that had happened. Before the police came to take our statements, Tyler sat next to my hospital bed and begged me to tell them I was the one driving. He kept saying a DUI would end everything for him, his scholarship, his future, and that it would destroy our father if people found out his son had been drinking and driving. He said he was sorry, that he would never forget what I was doing for him, that he would take care of me for the rest of my life. I said yes, not because I wanted to protect a lie, but because I loved my brother, and because some part of me believed that this sacrifice would mean something between us forever. When the police came, I told them I was driving. That story became the official record. Nobody ever questioned it, not even our parents. I held on to his promise for years. I told myself it was worth it, that he would never let me down after everything I gave up for him that night. I had no idea how much that promise would mean nothing when it actually mattered. The years after the crash were the hardest of my life. I spent months in physical therapy, learning how to do things that used to be automatic. Getting dressed, cooking, even just moving from my bed to my chair took practice and patience I didn't know I had. Eventually I learned to drive again, this time in a car fitted with hand controls. It felt like starting my whole life over from scratch. Tyler's life kept moving forward like nothing had happened. He went off to college, finished his degree, and landed a good job at a real estate firm in the city. He had an active social life, plenty of friends, and a future that looked exactly the way everyone expected it to. I was happy for him, even though some nights I wondered why his life got to stay the same while mine had been rebuilt from the ground up. Friends from high school slowly disappeared from my life. Some didn't know what to say to me anymore. Others stopped inviting me places because it was easier than figuring out if somewhere was accessible. I understood it, even when it hurt. What hurt more was watching my own family quietly rewrite what happened. My mother, Diane, started referring to it as Claire's accident, like it was something that just happened to me alone, with no mention of how it actually happened or why. My father, Richard, stopped bringing it up altogether. It was easier for both of them to just not talk about it. Little by little, I started feeling like an inconvenience in my own family. I'd hear about gatherings after they already happened, with my mother saying she didn't want me to feel like I had to come if it wasn't easy to get to. During holidays, I'd often end up seated off to the side, away from the main table, where my chair wouldn't be in the way. The one person who never made me feel like a burden was Maria Lopez. She started out as my home health aide not long after the accident, helping me through physical therapy and daily routines. Over time, she became something much more than that. She was the one person who showed up consistently, who listened without flinching, who treated me like a whole person instead of something to manage. She became the closest thing I had to a sister, and over the years, she was often the only family I could really count on. Tyler met Emily Carter at a charity gala downtown. He came home that night talking about her nonstop, how kind she was, how down to earth, how different she felt from anyone else he'd dated. Emily's parents, Robert and Susan Carter, owned a chain of car dealerships across the state and were known throughout the community for their success and their reputation. Everyone in town knew the Carter name. For my parents, this wasn't just good news. It felt like everything they had been waiting for. A connection to a family like the Carters meant something to them. Status, respect, the kind of standing they had always wanted in our town. I'd never seen my mother light up the way she did when Tyler first mentioned Emily's last name. I was happy for him too, honestly. Despite everything between us, I still wanted my brother to find someone who made him happy. I didn't expect anything to change for me because of it. I was wrong. As the relationship moved forward, there were dinners, family introductions, small gatherings meant to bring the two families closer together. I started noticing I wasn't part of any of it. I'd hear about a dinner days after it happened, mentioned briefly, almost as an afterthought. At first I told myself it was a scheduling thing, nothing personal. One evening, I finally asked my mother directly why I hadn't been included in any of the early get-togethers with Emily's family. She paused for a second before answering, choosing her words carefully. She said, "We just don't want to overwhelm Emily's parents right away." I sat with that sentence for a long time after she said it. There was no confusion about what it really meant. It wasn't about scheduling or timing or anything logistical. It meant my chair, my body, the way I moved through the world, was something my mother thought needed to be eased into rather than simply accepted. It meant that to her, I was something that might be too much for new people to handle right away. I didn't argue with her. I didn't cry, at least not in front of her. I just nodded and said I understood. And the truth is, I did understand, more clearly than I wanted to. I understood exactly where I stood in this family, and exactly how far they were willing to go to make sure nothing about me got in the way of this new connection they'd been waiting for. Once Tyler and Emily got engaged, the planning for the engagement party took over our whole family's life. They booked the Crestwood Country Club, one of the nicest venues in town, and the guest list grew to almost 200 people, including a large number of Emily's parents' business associates and friends. My mother and father treated this party like it was the most important event of their lives. Every detail mattered to them. The flowers, the lighting, the seating charts, all of it had to be perfect enough to impress the Carters. I watched my parents spend weeks going back and forth with the event planner, changing small things over and over again, trying to make sure nothing about the night looked anything less than flawless. One afternoon, I was sitting in the next room when I heard my mother on the phone with the event planner. She lowered her voice, but I still heard her clearly. She was asking if the area set aside for my wheelchair could be moved somewhere less central, closer to the back, away from where most of the photos would be taken. She said it so casually, like she was talking about flower arrangements instead of where her own daughter would be sitting at her brother's engagement party. A few days later, during a fitting for the dress I planned to wear that night, I brought it up to Tyler. I asked him directly if he knew about the seating plan, if he was okay with it. He got irritated almost immediately, telling me I was being too sensitive, that this night wasn't about me, and that I needed to stop making everything difficult for him. His words stung, but I didn't argue back. I told myself he was just stressed about the wedding, about impressing Emily's family, about living up to everyone's expectations. I decided to go to the party anyway. Some part of me still loved my brother enough to want to be there for him, no matter how he'd been treating me lately. And another part of me, quieter but still there, hoped that maybe on this night, surrounded by people who mattered to him, he would finally treat me like his sister again instead of something he needed to manage or hide away. The night of the party, I put on my new dress and did my hair carefully, telling myself this would be a good night. I wanted to walk in or roll in with my head held high, ready to celebrate my brother no matter how things had been between us lately. The Crestwood Country Club looked beautiful that evening, lights strung up everywhere, tables covered in white linen, music playing softly in the background. Tyler looked sharp in his suit, standing close to Emily, greeting guests as they arrived. I made my way through the crowd, smiling, congratulating people, trying to just enjoy the moment. As the night went on, it came time for the toast. Everyone started gathering near the cake table for photos, family and close friends crowding in together, while the hired photographer set up his shots. I rolled forward to be part of the group, the way anyone would at their brother's engagement party. I noticed Tyler glancing at me nervously, sweat on his forehead, his eyes darting toward Robert and Susan Carter standing just a few feet away. He leaned down close to me and hissed under his breath that I needed to move out of the frame, that I was ruining the photo. I tried to back my chair up to give them space, but the wheel caught on a cable running along the floor, and I couldn't move as quickly as he wanted. What happened next felt like it happened in slow motion and all at once. Tyler grabbed the handles of my wheelchair from behind, panicking about the picture being ruined in front of Emily's parents, and shoved hard. The chair tipped, and I was thrown out of it onto the cold marble floor, right there in front of every single guest, including Robert and Susan Carter standing just steps away. The room went completely silent. 200 people froze, drinks in hand mid-conversation, staring at me on the ground in my new dress, my chair knocked over beside me. The photographer, who had been mid-shot the entire time, captured every second of it on camera, the toast, the panic on Tyler's face, and the moment he pushed me to the floor in front of everyone we knew. I lay there on the cold marble floor, my wrist throbbing, pain shooting up my arm. But the physical pain was nothing compared to the humiliation washing over me. 200 people stood frozen, staring, and for a few long seconds, nobody moved at all. Then Tyler did something I will never forget. Instead of kneeling down to help me, instead of even checking if I was okay, he straightened up, turned to face the crowd, and said loud enough for everyone to hear, "She does this. She likes the attention." Like I had thrown myself out of my own chair on purpose, in front of his future in-laws, just to make a scene. My mother rushed forward, but not toward me. She went straight to Tyler, putting a hand on his arm, trying to calm him down, asking him quietly if he was okay. My father moved just as quickly, but in a different direction. He pulled the event planner aside, speaking low and urgent, already trying to figure out how to manage the situation, how to keep the night from being ruined, how to control what people would say about this later. Nobody from my own family came to help me off the floor. It was Susan Carter, Emily's mother, who pushed through the crowd first. She knelt down beside me without hesitation, her face full of genuine concern, and immediately started demanding that someone call an ambulance. In that moment, a woman I barely knew showed me more basic human decency than my own parents did. The paramedics confirmed my wrist was fractured. I was given a temporary brace and told to follow up with a specialist. Nobody in my family rode with me to get checked out. I was eventually driven home that night by one of Susan's staff, sitting alone in the back seat in my torn dress, my wrist wrapped, replaying the sound of Tyler's voice telling 200 people that I liked the attention. By the time I got home, I wasn't crying anymore. I sat in the quiet of my apartment, staring at the wall, feeling something shift inside me that had been holding on for 8 long years. The fear I'd carried since I was 18, the need to protect him no matter what it cost me, the hope that loyalty would eventually be returned, all of it finally broke that night. I knew, lying there in the silence, that I was done staying quiet. The next morning, I rolled into my closet and pulled out an old shoebox I'd kept tucked away on a low shelf for years. I hadn't opened it since right after the accident. My hands were shaking a little as I lifted the lid, not because I'd forgotten what was inside, but because I knew exactly what I was about to face. Inside were my hospital intake records from that night, the real ones, showing clearly that I wasn't the one tested for alcohol. There was also a letter, handwritten, folded carefully, that Tyler had given me while I was still in my hospital bed. In it, he admitted everything that actually happened that night and begged me to forgive him. And underneath that letter was something I'd almost forgotten I still had. An old voicemail recording Tyler had left for our parents that same night, his voice shaking and panicked, saying things that made it very clear who had really been behind the wheel. I had saved all of it quietly, never planning to use any of it, just unable to throw away the only honest record of what had truly happened. For 8 years, I had protected my brother with my silence, choosing his future over my own truth, again and again, without ever asking for anything in return. Sitting there with the shoebox open in my lap, I realized something important. I didn't want to destroy Tyler's life out of anger. I didn't want revenge just for the sake of revenge. What I wanted was simpler than that. I wanted the truth to exist somewhere outside my own memory, somewhere it couldn't be quietly rewritten or erased the way our family had been doing for years. I thought about Susan Carter kneeling beside me on that marble floor, the only person who had shown me real concern that night. I picked up my phone and called her directly. When she answered, I kept my voice calm and steady, telling her there was something important I needed to share with her and Robert before the wedding moved forward any further. I asked if the two of them would be willing to meet with me privately, just the three of us, so I could explain everything in person. Susan didn't ask questions over the phone. She simply agreed, telling me they would make time whenever I was ready. After I hung up, I sat there for a long moment, holding the shoebox close, finally ready to let the truth speak for itself. A few days later, I sat across from Robert and Susan Carter in the quiet of their living room. Emily was there too, sitting beside her mother, having asked to be present once she heard I wanted to talk to her parents about something important. I took a deep breath and started talking, keeping my voice calm and steady, even though my heart was pounding. I told them the truth about the night of the accident, 8 years ago. I explained that Tyler had been the one driving, not me, and that I had agreed to tell the police otherwise to protect him from a DUI charge and everything it would have cost him. I told them about the promise he made to me that night, that he would take care of me for the rest of his life, and how that promise had quietly disappeared over the years until it meant nothing at all. I placed the old letter on the table in front of them, the one Tyler wrote in his own handwriting while I was still in my hospital bed, admitting exactly what had happened and asking for my forgiveness. Robert picked it up and read it slowly, his expression growing harder with every line. Then I told them about something I hadn't even asked for. The photographer who had been hired for the engagement party reached out to me a day after the event, saying he felt sick about what he had witnessed and wanted me to have the full footage, unedited as a courtesy. I hadn't planned to show it to anyone, but I brought it with me anyway. I played it for them quietly. Robert watched the screen without saying a word, his jaw tight, as he saw Tyler shove my wheelchair and then tell 200 people that I liked the attention. For a man who had built his entire reputation on honesty and his word being worth something, watching his future son-in-law lie so easily, in the same breath as hurting someone, changed everything in his eyes. Emily sat frozen beside her mother, tears streaming down her face by the time the footage ended. She didn't say much to me that night, but I could see something break in her expression, the same way something had broken in mine on that marble floor. That same evening, Emily called Tyler and confronted him with everything she had just learned. By the next morning, word had already reached my parents that the engagement was over. The wedding invitations, still waiting to be sent, never went out at all. In the weeks that followed, I didn't tell anyone what had happened. I didn't need to. The Carters were well known and well respected throughout our community, and once people realized they had quietly distanced themselves from Tyler, questions started, and answers slowly made their way around on their own. Tyler's job at the real estate firm had close ties to Robert Carter's business circle, connections that had helped him land the position in the first place. Within a month, those same connections worked against him, and he lost his job entirely. The life he had built so carefully, the one he had protected at my expense for 8 years, started falling apart piece by piece. At home, my parents could no longer look away from what they had done. For the first time, Richard and Diane sat me down and talked honestly about everything, the years of excuses, the seating arrangements, the constant choice to protect Tyler's comfort over my dignity. Their apology came late, and it didn't undo 8 years of feeling like an afterthought in my own family, but it was honest, and for the first time, it felt real. I made a decision around that same time that had nothing to do with any of them. With Maria's help, I found a small apartment built to be fully accessible, my own space, my own rules, no back rooms, no hidden seating charts. Moving in felt like exhaling after holding my breath for years. Not long after, I started volunteering with a local disability advocacy group in town. I began sharing parts of my story, not all of it, but enough to help other people who had felt pushed aside the way I had for so long. Speaking up for myself, even quietly, felt like something I had never fully allowed myself to do before. I never set out to destroy my brother's life. I didn't take any satisfaction in watching it fall apart. What I wanted, the only thing I really wanted, was to stop carrying a lie that was never mine to carry in the first place. 8 years of silence had cost me more than anyone in my family ever understood. These days, my life looks different. Smaller in some ways, but honest in a way it never was before. I sit in my own apartment, in my own chair, in a life nobody gets to quietly rearrange around me anymore. For the first time in 8 years, I finally feel like myself again.